Dr. Brian Van Brunt, and I am the Director of Behavior and Threat Management for DPREP Safety. This is our second Threats Quick Takes, and what I wanted to look at here was the two different kinds of violence, affective and predatory violence. Affective violence is driven by our emotions. This is a scenario where someone gets upset, there's an environmental stressor, they're cut off by someone in front of their car, and there's a reactive emotional chain of events that occurs. The person becomes angry, they start yelling, there's an exchange. The violence here is poorly planned, it's reactive to the situation at the moment, and it is something that often lacks a lethality or a high level of dangerousness. Now, if you're the one being threatened or shouted at, certainly that perception of dangerousness might be a little different. But generally speaking, when we talk about affective violence, this is violence that is quick or over a relatively short period of time and does not have a lasting impact. The other kind of violence is the violence we see much more commonly with school shootings, larger attack events, and this is violence called predatory, strategic, tactical, instrumental, mission-oriented. There's a lot of different names for it. The common theme with many of these names is that this predatory violence, this tactical violence, is violence that instead of the person reacting immediately, they take a pause, they internalize things, and they think more about how to get revenge or pay that person back. The idea here is that the violence is not immediate in terms of the reaction, but instead the violence occurs over time. And oftentimes when people engage in this kind of targeted violence, what we see is weeks, months, sometimes years that pass where the person has identified someone who has wronged them, maybe created a grievance or an injustice against them, and they hold that person responsible. So when we're doing a threat assessment, a big part of the assessment is determining, is this more of that transient, affective violence that's over very quickly, or is this something more substantive and something that's more in that predatory or strategic range of violence and violence behavior? And this is an important distinction to make because many times the affective violence can be very loud bark and scary and draw attention and get a resource response, whereas the quiet, withdrawn, more targeted and strategic violence often goes unchecked because we don't have those behavioral indicators or someone stepping beyond like a student code of conduct or a criminal charge, but instead they're quietly planning for that time to strike, almost like a cat stalking a prey, that there's a predatory nature to this. So again, a big part of threat assessment and threat assessment process is understanding, is the individual in question really operating under this affective violence reactive space, or is this a bit more where someone is planning things over a long term? Certainly there are some cases that overlap. There's many times where we have an individual moving towards a larger, say, campus shooting or school attack who has periods of these affective violence kind of flare-ups. The difference here, though, is that they hold on to those past wrongs, the grievances. They often develop a fixation and a focus, a narrowing onto a particular target that sometimes is shown in their social media postings, writings, or conversations with others. So thanks again for taking a little time with us to look at this quick takes and threat assessment. I appreciate it.